I deal in the porn addiction space, right? Like that's what I planted my flag deeply 5 years ago, and that's what we're committed to doing this season of life, is helping guys get out of this. Full transparency, when I started, I looked at the church and I said they're not really solving the problem, and I think you guys would probably both agree that's not really being handled here within the walls of the church. I think data points a lot to that. 70% of men actively in the church admit to viewing pornography on a regular basis. 75% of pastors will tell you it's one of the biggest issues in their congregation. 56% of divorces will tell you that one person had a compulsive and excessive use of pornography. 56% of pastors that were asked identify as struggling with it, and the number goes higher when you get into youth pastors. Over 60% of youth pastors. So I know we're not going to solve this problem here today, but what do you guys see is the problem with the church not maybe either addressing it or having the tools, resources, information, understanding? Like, what do you think it is that's keeping the church from really being able to handle this?
I think the biggest problem is we see it as just like a regular sin and not an addiction.
Yeah.
Is really what it is. And here's the other side of it. It's really hard, and I think you understand this, like the older generation to understand what the younger generation is walking through. Like I've had a lot of conversations with pastors. Like we have to figure out how to allow our younger pastors to go, I have a problem. Or our younger staff to say, I have a problem. Because if they saw it at a younger age, the possibility of addiction, I try to explain, I'm like, guys, you don't understand. You could watch this nonstop and still not have the level of addiction that a younger person has, because the first time they saw it was at the age of 10. And so because that went in there. And so I think that's the hard part. And then really, what is where do we send them? One, getting somebody to actually admit that they have a problem. And then two, help them understand, like, no, this is like, because the world doesn't think it's that big of a problem. And we're trying to tell you have an addiction. And so it's that big thing. It's like, how do I get somebody that into it? And so we've, and I think accountability helps. I think groups help, all that kind of stuff. But if you don't tackle it like it's a huge problem, like it's not something you fall into, it's something you're addicted to, then you can't solve it. And so it is. And we've talked about this. It's one of my biggest struggles in it, because I feel like there's such a large amount of men that are dealing with it, but what is it? I can't send all of them into one thing at one time. The size church that we are kind of deal. It's like, how do I deal with this? How do I get people started on this? It's like, how do I take next steps in this? I've even got to a point where I'm like, I'm not going to teach on pornography if I don't have a next step, because I don't want someone to feel a false hope, then go back into it, allow that guilt shame cycle to keep them in that same place over and over again. So I think it is. I think it's a question. I think it's one of those things where I'm going, how do we solve this? How do we walk through this? How do we get young people to understand it's a big enough problem to walk through? Because you told me it's a lot easier to work with people that can lose their family and their wife, but a young person that doesn't have any of that, their loss is not that big. It's not until they meet somebody that they want to fall in love with or whatever, if they even can anymore because of the addiction, that they want to walk towards it. So I think it is. It's one of those big things. It's like, golly, it's so freaking multifaceted. It's like, it is. It's so big, but it's like, we got to start just leaning into it more, talking about it more, being a regular part. I mean, last time I talked about porn, I had an older lady come up to me like, why do you always want to talk about porn? I'm like, because it's what everybody's dealing with. Mm-hmm. You may not. Yeah. But I said, if you looked around, most of these guys do. Yeah. And it's something you deal with even when you're not. I haven't looked at it in a very long time. I still tell people I'm addicted to porn. Why? Because I want to. Absolutely, I want to. It's naked women. Who doesn't? I mean, I guess there's some people that doesn't want to look at that, but like, of course I want to look at it.
Wars have been started.
Right,
I mean,
absolutely.
over naked women. Right?
Yeah. And it's the ultimate drug. It's the ultimate drug. I could feel better in just a moment. And so I have to have things in my house, on my phone, all my stuff, just to go, I don't even want to accidentally slip into that because I understand it. But to get people to that place, to get them from like, oh, it's just something that I do every once in a while, to understanding, no, this is an addiction that can wreck your life, I think is the tough part.
Yeah. I think the age gap, like you said, the older leadership not understanding it, the depth of the problem that it is, realizing that we've really, the drug that we're speaking of is 20 years old, right? The internet has only been around for maybe two decades. So I think changing that, and then opening up the conversation in a safe place where men can be vulnerable and share without the guilt and shame that comes with it. Because that's the first thing is, oh, we can't talk about this, right? Because that taboo, guilt, shame kind of thing now creeps kind of into place. I know this is obviously your zone of expertise, but it is to one extent, right? Because it's ministering to people. Your thoughts just in and around this whole conversation.
You said it already. It is conversation. It is not making it a taboo subject. Yeah. It seems new, but we were talking about this in my church, in my dad's church, when I was 9 and 10 years old. So it's always been around, and there wasn't internet like that, but there were magazines and there were stores and videotapes. And like I saw the first stuff I saw when I was 11 years old. My neighbor across the street, they had boxes and boxes of videotapes and all this stuff. And I just didn't get it. For me, it just didn't resonate for me. Not that I didn't like to see women or whatever. Someone falling into addiction to me didn't resonate. Why are we doing it? And even when I would have friends and we would talk about it, for me, it was always, well, let's talk about it. How are you where you are? What is it? Why are you drawn to it? There's the sexual nature of it, but what's going on in you that's getting you to this point? To me, and I had lined porn addiction up with alcohol addiction. Hey, what got you there? And let's talk about that. Let's just talk about what got you there, because addiction is addiction. Like I actually believe that I have a strong proclivity to be an addict, and so my fear keeps me from doing things, because I'm like, yo, I know me, and I feel like I'd be that guy. So let me just I'm not even gonna dabble, because I feel like I would go all in. And so for me, it's always been, how do we keep the conversation open? How do we keep it real? How do we create those safe places? And then how do we also not make the conversation about the subject?
Spot on there.
Make the conversation about the person.
Yeah.
What's the calling? Yeah, this is your addiction, but the addiction could be anything. This is just what you picked. This is just the thing that it is. What's driving you there? You know, the Bible makes it clear. There's 3 issues: lust of the eye, lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. So what is the issue that's driving you to this point? And then let's deal with that, because I found in my life, on those things that I like, that I really want to indulge in, it's like when I really take a step back and go, okay, what's my real issue? Why am I attracted to that? Oh, because you like power. Why are you attracted to that? Because you can create anything you want in any way you want when it comes to that situation. That's why you're drawn to that. Is it a childhood trauma? Is it an issue? Is it whatever those things is? And having people that can call you out, having stuff on your phone, having things that hold you accountable. Because even you can even have stuff on your phone and you can find a way to get around it. and you can have stuff on your phone and you're still not fixing the problem. You may be away from the subject, but you're not fixing the problem, and it'll manifest itself somewhere else.
100%. Yeah, you said it really clear. You know, porn, for most of these guys that are struggling with an addiction, has become the Band-Aid. And if you don't address what the wound is and you just replace it with a different Band-Aid, that wound is going to manifest itself in somewhere else. That's where they talk about getting to the root cause of the issues, identifying why that has become the outlet for you. But you hit on the head, man. We've seen it in creative people. We see it in high achievers, high performers, that proclivity to fall into these addictive patterns. If we're not aligned with God, if we're not creatively, fulfilling those passions inside of us. So I appreciate you guys doing that, kind of exploring that there with me. We're in talks with Adam from Clearwater right now, just so you know about what that next step is going to look like, and hopefully having something for the guys here at Grace, and whether that looks like an event, followed up with some action steps, whether it's a program 6-8 weeks long, where that conversation it's been going on for a couple of years. It kind of feels like it's now really beginning to make
and guys
headway.
won. We won when we did the marriage conference last year. We had a couple pastors up talking about their addictions, and the guys who their feedback was like, yo, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know pastors go through this. Yes.
Yeah.
We're human.
We go through
Well, it's
this
crazy.
too.
Anytime I go on a show or I'm interviewed by somebody, it's like they'll tell me, like, this conversation is always the most listened to, always the most downloaded, maybe not the most engaged with. Like, people want to hear this being talked about. Maybe they don't want to raise their hand or get involved in the conversation.
They want to hear it on YouTube, because I'll tell you this, when we would, at Young Adults, when we would say next week we're talking about porn, half of the room
would just show up.
Half of the room,
Yeah.
because they didn't, but in a safe place.
The
absolutely.
YouTube videos are like 3x
Right.
all the other messages, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, this has been awesome, guys. We're gonna wrap it up.